Today on Locked On Phoenix Suns, coming off of an all-star game that left everybody disappointed, the Phoenix Suns' own Kevin Durant took to Twitter on Monday morning saying it's more fun to complain about the NBA than actually watch it. Coming up, I'll tell you why he is exactly right. Let's go.
You are Locked On Suns, your daily Phoenix Suns podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back into Locked On Phoenix Suns. I'm Brendon Kleen, a staff writer at Awful Announcing and a credentialed Suns media member. Thank you for making Locked On Suns your first listen to kick off your Tuesday. Don't forget Locked On Suns, free and available on all platforms, including YouTube. So click that follow or subscribe button. Do what thousands of other Suns fans have already done. Become an everydayer and get locked on to the Phoenix Suns right here each and every day. Today's episode is brought to you by the Locked On Suns Daily Newsletter. Check it out at lockedondaily.com. Free for you, great content straight to your inbox every day. Suns analysis, NBA analysis, news, fantasy advice, and more. Again, free for you, supports us big time. Let's dive right in. Ben and I, on Monday's show, we did do our fair share of critiquing the league and the All-Star situation. I feel like we had a pretty nuanced conversation, and we were looking forward a little bit, too, in terms of what happens next for the league and maybe how it can get out of this rut, especially around the All-Star game and this regular season, this stretch where I think the dog days of the season take over and the league kind of relies on the best players, the legends, to kind of bring people in and what happens after that. So, look, I don't want to pretend like I'm not, a culprit in some of this as well, but Kevin Durant tweeted on Monday morning, I'm sure seeing a lot of that criticism, including on the broadcast of the All-Star game itself, where Draymond Green and Charles Barkley and others are insulting the product as it's happening. And Katie said, or wrote, I should say, I think it's more fun to complain about the NBA than to actually watch it. And he's saying that for other people, of course. He said, crazy, cancel All-Star Weekend, and let's just give everybody a break since we're so miserable around this time. And in typical Durant fashion, he went on to, engage with a few people and reply. He said, these topics aren't just online. They're hitting mainstream media. Fans complain about everything. Nothing is good enough. They enjoy the playoffs, the trade deadline, free agency, and player beefs, and that's it. Everybody's only concerned about rings and legacy. On and on he went. And I appreciate it. I always do when Kevin Durant engages with criticism, when he engages with the narratives around the league, around him, around the team, whatever it might be. And we don't need to dive into each and every element of what he said, but the main kind of idea that I think was relevant to it is this negativity problem that the NBA very much has. And it's why I'm very careful. I don't do a lot of that on here. Even on the Awful Announcing podcast that I host, where I'm talking bigger picture about some of these topics and more from a media angle, I really don't tread into this very often because I just don't want to contribute to it. I don't want to contribute to the complaining and the negativity. It kind of reminds me of this tweet that it goes around every so often that it was popular, like I think it came around from whoever posted it like 10 years ago. And the gist of it was, every day there's a main character on Twitter, and your job is to log on and not become that person, right? And it's kind of funny, like, yes, that's really sort of true. If you've been on Twitter long enough, somebody's tweet goes viral in a not so good way, getting dunked on, getting made fun of, whatever. It feels like that's the case in sports as well. There's always some kind of thing that people have as their kind of pet issue. And for whatever reason, it's the NBA's turn. It has been for a year or two now. The All-Star game is a big part of it. The lack of care that comes across. I think that the, load management, I think even the league, frankly, coming up with this 65-game minimum threshold for awards eligibility and things like that has become has generated some negative publicity. And maybe the, kind of parody of the league lately where it feels a little random with some of these teams making the finals. And that's largely because of player availability and the uneven nature of the regular season. I think all of that is kind of how we got here, but it's undeniable that the league is that main character right now in sports, and in a not so good way. If you, like I do, you love the sport, then I'm sure you agree. But let's just square a few things away here, okay? This past season, the past 2 seasons, 3 seasons even, if you want to stretch back that far, have rebounded in terms of viewership for the NBA Finals. And that's just one mark to look at. That's not everything. They're not as high as, maybe the heyday of LeBron James being in the Finals 8 straight seasons, but these past couple years have been higher than the 2007 Finals, in the same ballpark as the 2006, 2005, higher than 2003. And then once you go back from there, you start to get into, hard comparisons where, everything was on, everybody was watching TV every night and things like that. It's not quite comparable, but it is not as if things have fallen off a cliff here. I know nobody cares about this, but league revenues, attendance, things like that, as good as they've ever been. So it's just important to keep that in the back of your mind if we're talking about, what's wrong with the NBA. From the owner's standpoints, not much. And maybe that's part of the problem, right? If the people in charge don't have an incentive to address what the consumer or the fan or whatever you want to call it is saying, then that can become a problem. And I think there are things that are, All-Star, of course, you heard me yesterday. I don't think it's great. I think that one of the things we did talk about yesterday, I will hold on to, is a problem, which is the reservations and kind of hidden nature of how superstar players act, where they're not front and center. They don't participate in kind of the day-to-day storytelling and just consumption, engagement of the games and whatever. Just to bring it here to Phoenix, if you remember, Devin Booker didn't speak after the season a couple times, I think in 2022 and 2023. Definitely one of those years. It might have been both. And I was critical of that. The Suns didn't hold kind of the typical post-game media or postseason media, exit meeting type stuff. I think that is a real detriment. It sets a bad precedent, and it tells the fans, us communicating to you as players, as executives, as coaches, that doesn't matter to us. I think that's really bad. That's one of the things I think needs to change. On the court, I do think that there is something to be said for the idea that it is so glaringly obvious that the playoff product, in terms of how the game is officiated, how teams, scheme and game plan and things like that, is so clearly the better product, and yet we obviously don't get that same thing from game 1 to 82. That's not what it should be. It should feel the same. It should feel as close to an elite level of competition week to week, game to game, night to night as it humanly can. And I do think that the availability of players, both in the real injury concerns that I think this era has brought about, where guys are asked to do more physically than they ever have been, as well as the load management, which is sometimes the star player orchestrating it, and more often than I think we realize, it is the team orchestrating it, which is, due to statistical analysis of health and sports science and gains we've made in that field, leads people to believe that not competing in the sport is better at times than competing in the sport. Whether that's true or not, I'm not a scientist to tell you, but I can tell you it damages the product. And I think all those things are real. Those are kind of my 3 things that I think the league should be engaging with. Adam Silver himself recently came out and said, he did a bunch of media. He acknowledged that players kind of being a square peg in a round hole in terms of how they're asked to play the game, and the difference between that regular season and postseason and the kind of physicality that fans come to expect is something he wants to change. The kind of pace and rhythm of play is something he would be open to changing. There's new media partners coming in. You would hope that would change. So the league is responding to this stuff. But I think that what Durant is saying is absolutely true. And what I would point to is those main characters that have maybe come and gone, they survived it. It was just noise. And I'm going to always come at this from the perspective of wanting to be constructive. Those initial concerns came from people who loved the NBA and wanted it to be better. The conversation now has been stolen away by people who might not even care about the league, might not even be fans of it. But because the league is the main character right now, when it comes to these types of big picture, debatable, let's kind of find, put your genius hat on and go to work types of topics for TV, radio, podcasts, whatever, it's now definitely the main, and I would say in a lot of cases the only entry point for discussion about the NBA. And if anyone is in that camp, try to get out of it. Because there is a constructive conversation to be had. But complaining and just piling on, number one, you probably got to look yourself in the mirror and think, do I actually like basketball? And number two, am I just critiquing something and trying to fix something because that's what everyone else is doing? What might be helpful, especially now that the All-Star game, which we all agree is subpar, is in the rearview mirror, turn the game on. Remind yourself, wait a second, do I actually hate what I'm watching? Or is that just what I heard I'm supposed to think? And so I have a million ideas about how to fix something that's not broken. Next, Dwayne Rankin took advantage of some access to one former Sun at the Rising Stars Challenge and wrote an article throwing out something that a lot of people online have come at me about as to whether the Suns would be better if that player was still on the team. I'll break it down next. First, today's show is brought to you by TurboTax. This is a message from sponsor Intuit. TurboTax. Taxes was waiting and wondering and worrying if you were going to get any money back, and then waiting, wondering, and worrying some more. Now Taxes is matching with a TurboTax expert who can do your taxes as soon as today. An expert who gives your taxes their undivided attention as they work on your return while you get real-time updates on their progress so you can focus on your day. An expert who will find you every deduction possible and file every form, every investment, everything with 100% accuracy. All so you can get the most money back guaranteed. No waiting, no wondering, no worries. Now this is Taxes. Get an expert now at TurboTax.com. Only available with TurboTax Live full service. Real-time updates only in the iOS mobile app. See guarantee details at TurboTax.com/guarantees. All right, let's keep it rolling. Don't forget to sign up for that Locked On Suns daily newsletter if you have not already. Free for you, supports us. Great info, great new updates about your team, this show, the NBA, and even some fantasy advice for you, which, hey, that's not usually free, guys. So take advantage. All right. Toumani Camara is the player who I was referencing going into that break, and Dwayne Rankin over at the Arizona Republic was able to catch up with Toumani Camara at the Rising Stars Challenge, and he asked him a very simple question. Would you have been able to develop like this in Phoenix? And Camara said, for sure, because of who I am. I feel like I'm never satisfied where I'm at. I'm always trying to get better in every situation. And I feel like the month I spent in Phoenix, a lot of people appreciated my game and stuff like that. I was pretty confident in the space and environment that I was in. He said of his own growth coming into the Rising Stars Challenge as a pick in the 50s, he said, it's crazy. It's something I've always dreamed about, and being here is really humbling. I feel like I don't really realize the situation that I'm in, and I'm more trying to get back to the season already. It's an amazing experience. So, let's just go down the what-if imaginary walk here, okay? The Portland Trailblazers are the 25th defense in the NBA. The Suns are the 27th defense. If, like Dwayne Rankin and tons of people that I see on the Suns subreddit, on X, in the YouTube comments, on the channel, here, everywhere online that Suns fans are, I see this thrown out there. The Suns would be better with Toumani Camara. And if you're going to make that argument, you are saying it on the defensive end. Because, yes, guys, we did watch the dude go get scorching hot on the other night when the Suns played them. He was pretty good in both games, but especially that second game, he was like 4 of 4 or 5 of 5 from 3. Might have even been more than that. That's not what he does. Okay, let's just be realistic with ourselves. It's just not really what Toumani Camara is as a player. He's 36% from deep this year, better than I would have guessed in year 2, don't get me wrong, but still below league average and on a relatively low volume. He is at 4 a game, 5 per 36 minutes. That's fine. It's what a wing should be doing in the league, but he's not any sort of guy that I think on a good team, on a great team, on even a playoff team that teams are really going to be covering. If the Blazers were to storm into the play-in and teams had a week to game plan or a couple days to really throw together a game plan, Toumani Camara is going to be somebody they leave open, somebody that they dare to shoot. And so his defense in year 2, we're talking about right now, okay? Because there is an argument to be made that the Suns have been able to keep Toumani Camara in the DeAndre Ayton trade that sent Ayton and Camara to Portland for Yusuf Nurkic, Grayson Allen, and Royce and Nasir Little, that this year's Suns team would be better. And if you're making that case, for all the reasons I just said, it is because of his defense. But the Trailblazers are only a little bit better on the defensive end than the Suns. So, does that mean that Camara is a bad defender? Well, no, not quite, because if you look at box plus minus on Basketball Reference, which I know these numbers are not everything, but they're good to look at, he is just above average. If you look at dunksandthrees.com, which is, in my opinion, a better one, he is in sort of a tier just below elite, where he is, on par. Let's see, who are some of the guys in his range? Wendell Carter Jr., Haywood Highsmith, Jayshawn Tate, these kind of role player defender guys, right? D'Anthony Melton, that's Kenrich Williams in Oklahoma City. OG Anunoby's in there. Okay, interesting. But yeah, it's like, a little bit above that, you're getting into Jared Vanderbilt, Eric Jones, Derek White, Tari Eason, really more of that elite Jaren Jackson type of level. And then at the very top of the league, it's Wembanyama, it's Caruso, it's those guys. Bam. And of course, no one would ever say Camara would be there. So what is the case here? A good, above average to good defender with, a good steal rate, a good block rate, the measurables, the IQ you would want from a defender. Well, what's the reason that he's on, you could say that about him and he grades out well, and yet he's on a bad defense? Well, what I would tell you is that is exactly the same case that you would see in Phoenix. That is exactly the same dynamic you would see with the Suns. Because a non-big man, younger, meaning maybe not quite as physically strong as he's going to get, maybe not quite the IQ level that he's going to get to, the game plan, discipline, things like that, because he is only in the second year of his career and he is only 24. Again, a wing, not a big. The impact that a player like that can have is relatively minimal, okay? The best version of a guy like that, if he doesn't have a ton of offensive game to provide you, is only going to be able to help your team so much. Like a good example of what I'm talking about, Dyson Daniels, okay? Dyson Daniels. Maybe the best perimeter defender in the NBA at his kind of type. Like, Alex Caruso probably holds that right now. Maybe there's some other guys you would argue for, but Dyson can easily throw his name in the mix, right? He is above Camara by a lot. He is kind of right below that very elite level of defensive player in terms of, EPM on dunks and threes as just one example. But you look, and overall this season, the Hawks are slightly worse with Dyson Daniels on the court. And weirdly, their defense is what's been worse and whatever else. But it just goes to show a dominant defensive center, most of the time, that player's team is going to be elite when they're on the court because being able to shut down the paint, actively block and deter the easiest kind of shot in basketball, layups and dunks, and, on the offensive end, offensive rebound, some of those things that can go a long way for you, that's just going to be more impactful. Now, I know this is somewhat numbers-based, and we don't have to be like that. I'm not saying Toumani Camara would not help the Suns at all. But the Suns are in a situation right now where they are, bottom 4 defense, below 500, on the precipice of a failure of a season, and I just cannot get across the finish line with the idea of a relatively raw, mostly defense-only wing player would change the Suns' fortunes much at all. The Blazers are not a very good team. Their defense is just as poor. Other comparable players around the league do not make this type of impact, even on better rosters. And not to mention, the Suns already have Ryan Dunn, who fills that mold to a degree. Probably worse, yes, worse right now than Camara. He's 2 years younger. He's been in the league one fewer season. I don't think that's going to be the difference between where the Suns are and where they would like to be, or even much of a difference at all. Toumani Camara, would I like to have him on this Suns roster in a perfect world? I mean, heck yeah, of course I would. He's a second-round pick that you could have on this team for years and years to come. I told you the Suns made a mistake including him at that time. I was hyping up his G League or his Summer League performance just like everybody else. I did a segment last week when I was solo on the show saying that there's a difference between misguided and a mistake. The Bradley Beal trade, maybe the amount that they gave up for Kevin Durant, some of the other things along the way, mistakes. You could understand it in the moment, but it just didn't work out. The DeAndre Ayton trade, being in such a hurry to get him out the door, adding an asset like Camara to the package, and making such a risky swing was misguided. It was a cell phone. It was an unforced error in the moment. So that was a mistake. Camara as a prospect, as a role player piece on this Suns team, great. Would love to have it. Toumani Camara as a difference maker between a 26 and 28 team with a cellar-dwelling defense and underperforming consistently on a nightly basis, that guy's going to change what the Suns have run into this season? No. No, I don't think so. I don't believe it. That's where I am. The buyout market. Is that something the Suns should even be looking at? I'll give you the names that are out there and whether it would be worth considering anybody next. First, today's show is brought to you by Hungry Root. When it comes to grocery shopping and meal planning, we all have the same problem. Not enough time between work, life, trying to eat healthier, and trying to do all the other things to stay busy and enjoy yourself. You get stressed. Want to go to the grocery store, buy things you need, but okay, what's on sale? What's the right ingredients for this or that dish? am I going to make what I just bought? It was on sale. Yeah, you get it. Everything changed when you discover Hungry Root, though. It's been a game changer for all of us here on the Locked On Podcast Network, and it's the easiest way to eat healthy without all the stress. With Hungry Root, it's like having a personal shopper and a nutritionist all in one. They take care of your grocery shopping, meal recommendations, and groceries based on your taste as well as your health goals, whether that be something like anti-inflammatory needs to high-protein or gluten-free options. And the best part is, every meal from Hungry Root is ready in 15 minutes or less. A huge time saver that makes healthy eating so much simpler. You're going to love Hungry Root as much as we do on the Locked On Podcast Network. And for a limited time, you can get 40% off your first box and a free item in every box for life by going to hungryroot.com/LockedOnNBA and using the code LockedOnNBA at checkout. That's hungryroot.com/LockedOnNBA, code LockedOnNBA for 40% off your first box and a free item of your choice in each box for life. That's hungryroot.com/LockedOnNBA, promo code LockedOnNBA. Don't miss out. All right, let's wrap here. We are, believe it or not, headed toward the buyout deadline, which is, let's see. Well, let me get it right here. NBA buyout deadline 2025. It is usually March 1st. It is March 1st again. That is about 2 weeks away. And some of these players get snatched up immediately when the deadline happens. So like Alex Len ended up in Washington from the Jonas Valanciunas trade, and he went right to the Lakers. Ben Simmons got bought out by the Nets almost immediately as part of just, right after the deadline, and he's already in LA with the Clippers. And then Torrey Craig got cut by the Bulls after they couldn't find a trade for him, and he's already in Boston. So some of this stuff has already started to shake out, and there's also a certain number of players that have already been cut but haven't landed anywhere yet. Okay? So here is kind of my thought. The Suns, after taking 2 players back for 1 in Jusuf Nurkic in the Charlotte trade, they don't have an open roster spot anymore. They did throughout the season. Now they do not. But they could easily decide to cut one of their own players and sign a different one if they wanted to. Now, if that sounds a little bit convoluted, maybe it is, but every front office has to be making these decisions. Everybody has to be thinking this way. I think that somebody like, a cheaper, younger, or, whatever you want to say younger, somebody like, I think Bol could be cut. I think somebody like Damian Lee could be cut potentially. I think somebody like maybe more likely, Vasa Micic, who the Suns got from the Hornets and does not appear to be in their long-term plans at all with a team option next season. They could just go ahead and decline the team option and cut him. They don't have to pay him that team option money, and he could just, most likely, I'm not saying this in a disparaging way, his trip to the U.S. has not really worked out. He's only 31. He could very easily go back overseas and make a career out of it. That's just some of what they might do. I'm not trying to tell you that they will or should. Everybody's contract is guaranteed at this point, and there is not an obvious, okay, just cut him type of guy. They have 2 rookies in Dunn and Oso who they're not going to trade. A lot of these guys are still in the rotation. Whatever. It's not a no-brainer. It's not even easy to necessarily see it happening, but I'm just laying out how it would look. Because I actually think that there are really 2 players that I think could be interesting buyout candidates for the Suns. Two who have already been cut. Like the article I'm looking at has this long shot list, and sign me up for any of these guys. Chris Boucher, Bruce Brown, Larry Nance. Of course, if those guys get cut, the Suns should be in the front of the freaking line, but it's not going to happen. It's not even long shots. That list is absurd. Nobody on that list is going to get cut. So 2 players I think could make some sense for the Suns for one reason that they both share. Jaden Springer, who got drafted by the Sixers and then went to Boston at last year's deadline and then now has been cut, and Jalen Hood-Schifino, okay? And I don't know if either one of them is ever going to work out, all right? I mean, probably not. But they're both young enough that actually Josh Richardson might get cut too, it looks like. That could be interesting. But these guys share this in common, which is that they're both still, if they hadn't been, they're both in the first 4 years of their career. Okay? That has me intrigued. Jaden Springer's 22, has never really had, he's never spent like a ton of time in the G League in the past couple of years, but also hasn't gotten really minutes in the NBA and is, again, still just 22. And then Hood Schifino, I understand, he didn't have the greatest draft kind of grades by a lot of people and hasn't been stellar in the minutes he's gotten, but he's only 21 and he's only in year 2. So he's been in the league even longer and had even less opportunities than Springer. These guys were both first round picks. They both had some promise. They're both at, a position of probably long-term need for the Suns as, bigger guards who can kind of play some point guard ideally. Maybe Springer's more of a small wing, type, Marcus Smart, Gary Payton II type player at, his ultimate destiny. But I bring these guys up because bringing them into the Suns system is more important than anything else, right? Sign them for the rest of the year, develop that relationship. If they just got cut, odds are they unfortunately are looking for minimum contracts next season. That's something the Suns can actually give them. The Suns now have a G League team. They now have, cohesion from NBA to G League with Bud's kind of coaching tree, setting up, planting seeds across all elements of it, playing the same type of way in both places and all of that type of thing. I know Ty Washington and Colin Gillespie are here. Frankly, those guys, we'll see, but I'm not going to make long-term plans around them. They're just also options potentially, and Gillespie's not exactly young. He's 26. It doesn't seem like it, but he is. So Springer and Hood Schifino, both of those players to me are guys where they are more than worth a flyer. They're also young where they're probably not going to be buyout players in the same way that others would be because a contending team's not going to want to sign them and say, you're going to be in our rotation, right? That doesn't really make any sense. Why would you, if you're, the Knicks or something, say, oh, Jaden Springer is going to come plug a hole for us? No, he's probably not. If you're going to do anything, you're going to go for a veteran guy. You're going to go for a Josh Richardson. You're going to go for, I don't know, a Reggie Jackson or something, right? So I would like to see the Suns do this. I think that, they don't get any sort of advantage with bird rights or any of that come the summertime. They'll just be able to give them a minimum. But why not? See how they look in practice. Maybe give them G League time down the stretch of the season. And you have that relationship and that advantage of having seen them come the summertime. You do have to cut somebody to do this. Maybe that gets in the way, but those two guys would definitely intrigue me. That'll wrap us up. Hit follow or subscribe if you have not already. Ben will be back with you tomorrow with Espo from PHNX, so get ready for that one by hitting follow or subscribe if you have not. We'll have one more before Suns Spurs on Thursday, and then we'll have a recap of that game. That's how the week's going to go. Enjoy the break, hopefully, from the Suns and from the NBA drama. And we'll be back with you tomorrow.